Welcome to A Date with Darkness podcast, where I will be discussing the impact of hurtful and abusive relationships and how to overcome them so that you can move through your pain and get to the kind of healthy relationships you want, need, and deserve. I'm Dr. Natalie Jones. I'm a licensed psychotherapist based in California. While I hope that you find this podcast educational and informational, please note it should not be substituted for treatment with a licensed mental health professional. Also, due to the nature of the podcast, some of the information presented on the show can be sensitive to some of my listeners, so please note that listener discretion is advised. Hello and welcome back to the show. I'm so excited to have you here, and so excited that the podcast seems to be growing in the number of listeners, and I'm so very appreciative for those of you who choose to support the show. Another great episode I have planned for you guys today, and I wanted to, my hair is a little bit bigger than usual today. It just kind of has a mind of its own. It's one of those rare days where it's actually been raining in California. We haven't had rain in a long time. So, of course, with the rain, the humidity hits and my hair turns into its own personality, I guess we'll say. But how are you? I hope that all of you are doing well, staying safe, taking care of yourselves during the midst of the COVID-19 pandemic. But I'm so happy to be here just sharing wisdom and insight with you today. Despite all that's going on out in the world, I hope that you're finding time to take care of yourselves, have some fun, and just nurture your soul. Because I definitely think that that's something that's needed to get through this challenging time. Okay, so before we get started into the crux of the show, of course, I like to discuss the administrative stuff. If you're interested in signing up for individual and group coaching memberships, please sign up at the link down below in the show notes. If you're watching this on YouTube, you just go to the show notes on YouTube as well and just click that link there in the description box. And if you're listening to the show on your podcast player, you can also watch the show on the YouTube channel, which has also been growing quite nicely. And I'm very happy about that. So you can just go on over to YouTube and be sure to subscribe there as well if you want to see how I record this podcast in a small corner in my living room. And if you are interested in being on my email newsletter, which typically comes out every Friday morning, it's called Reflections Over Coffee. And I like to think of you as drinking coffee or your tea while reading over the newsletter. Head on over to my website, drnataliejones.com. That link is also in the description box or show notes. And if you like this podcast, please be sure to leave a written review and subscribe, both on the YouTube channel or on your major podcast player. And be sure to share the podcast with at least 2 other people that you feel like could benefit from it. Sharing is caring, right? Okay, so so excited for projects that are coming up. So just know that there are collaborations and things going on behind the scenes that I'll be excited to share in the upcoming weeks with you all. So I want to move on, now that we've gotten the administrative stuff out of the way. I want to talk about a topic. If you listened to last week's episode, the last episode, I talked a lot about idealization in romantic relationships. Idealization happens a lot in relationships with narcissists, but on the last episode, I left it open for idealization in relationships specifically because, even when we're not in a relationship with a narcissist, we can still tend to idealize our partners and put our partners up on a pedestal. So this week, I want to talk about what happens at the opposite end of that spectrum. When you're in a relationship with a narcissist, they idealize their partner, they put them up on a pedestal, they wine and dine them, they make them seem like the most wonderful person ever. Um, they make all of these promises and all of these affirmations of love. You are the most wonderful person ever. I've never met anyone like you before. You're the first person I've wanted to marry, and all this other kind of stuff, just sort of putting you up on a pedestal and the beginning of a whirlwind romance where you're kind of just swept off of your feet. So at the opposite end of that, he is devaluation, which is exactly what I want to talk about today. Devaluation is when the narcissist is preparing to discard you or discard the relationship. What they will do is they will devalue, which means that they will find every which way to demean, disconnect, and deprecate their partner, right? So basically, they're putting their partner down in every which way to prepare to disconnect completely from that relationship. And there's a number of things that go on when we're being devalued in the relationship with a narcissist. And a lot of times, if you're in the crux of being devalued by a narcissist, you are not typically aware that that's what's happening until it's too late, until the relationship is done, or you're kind of picking up the pieces of yourself after things have just gone so left, and you're often left bamboozled, like you're wondering, what the hell just happened? How did I get here? What did I do wrong? So that's kind of what's happening to you emotionally when you're in the crux of being devalued. You're trying to figure out what's wrong with you. How can I fix this relationship? How can I get us back on track, right? Because devaluation is obviously a sharp shift from the idealization phase. There's usually, in your mind, you didn't see it coming, so it just kind of hit you like a freight train in the middle of a dark night. So you're just like left wondering, like, what did I do wrong? What's going on? What's wrong with me? Why is my partner not enamored with me anymore? What can I do to fix him or her? What can I do to fix this relationship? How can I get us back on track? That's usually what you're thinking. Or you may also be thinking that this is a phase, it'll blow over. I just need to walk on eggshells, or I just need to not be a problem. I need to not cause any stress, and we will get back to where we were in the beginning, where everything was all gravy, right? Everything was all peaches and cream, and we were just so in love with each other, and we couldn't wait until we had time with each other. So there's a lot of your thinking is wrapped around trying to fix it or getting back to the golden honeymoon phase, right? Um, so I want to talk a little bit about, how we know that we're being devalued. Um, and, there's a lot of people, in addition to talking about just what to look for in the devaluation stage. I also want to talk a little bit about, what you can do when this is happening to you, right? Because I think that's important to note, or what to do after this happens, right? If you're not catching it in time and you're kind of left in the wake of destruction, what to do, how to pick up the pieces and move on, right? So I want to touch on that. I won't go in a lot of detail on that last aspect because that's what the membership is for. But I definitely want to hit some of those points there. So, number one, when you are being devalued by a narcissist in your life or by a toxic person in your life, one of the things that's a telltale sign of devaluation is the person is constantly putting you down, right? And so put downs can come in the way of backward compliments, flat out just degrading comments, or degradation is what I was trying to say. Degrading comments, or just name calling and things like that, where a person is just really just putting you down. And again, one example I like to use, again, I was, I'll go back to the housewives. This time I'll talk a little bit about the wives of New Jersey. And If you watched any of the earlier seasons, Teresa Giudice and her husband, or then husband, Joe Giudice, got into, they were, in the first season, I think they were a very lovely, very lovey-dovey couple. And I think the second and third season is when they got into some legal troubles around financial matters, right? And during the time that they were kind of going to court and doing all the legal proceedings, things became very nasty um, between Teresa and her husband. And it became so nasty, whereas you could see her husband kind of berating her. They were stressed about this whole court thing, and he was berating her and putting her down. He was allegedly talking to other women, and there were situations where the show had allegedly recorded him talking to another woman and putting his wife down and calling her the C word and things like that. So he was, in addition to putting her down on camera, there was kind of this smear campaign going on behind her back, where he was just, everything that was going on was just, she was this, she was that. And it was a lot of ugliness in the breakdown of the relationship. And I say ugliness because it was hard to watch. So I don't know if you're into that show or not, but that's just an example of where a spouse is openly tearing down another spouse. They're openly putting them down. And I'm not one to watch TV a lot. But I don't know why I have a weak spot for the housewives, at least like the older episodes. But I would say that if you're watching shows like that, where people are putting their spouses and or their loved ones down on camera, I can only imagine what's going on off camera. And it was a lot of emotional turmoil, and very challenging to watch. But you could see how she was, the partner was being put down. There were some backhanded compliments, a lot of just a smear campaign when her husband was around other people. And this stuff, I will also go out on and make a point and say that this isn't male or female. And so I'm not saying that all men do this or any of that kind of stuff. I'm just saying that this is one example of when I've seen you know the degrading, the putting the partner down. The second point that I want to note is holding back on being intimate or showing affection. So this is very intentional, where a partner doesn't want to give you affection, like they are intentionally disconnecting from you in all ways that symbolize affection. So there's no emotional affection, there's no physical affection. It's a coldness. It's like a blatant coldness. And it's something that, they become something where they become very cold, even in sleeping patterns. So for example, if you and your partner like to spoon, typically when you go to sleep, or your partner is physically close, and you embrace when you go to bed. During the devaluation stage, the person will physically distance themselves from you, in bed. So that means that they may get up and go sleep in another room. They may not sleep with you at all. An intentional, be intentional about waiting until you fall asleep before they join you in the bedroom, right? And make sure that you're asleep. And so that there's no chance that the two of you could be physically intimate or close. Even in sleeping, they may sleep way at the opposite end of the bed, and just be very frigid or hostile if you try to touch them, like physically hostile or aggressive, or verbally hostile, until kind of tell you not to touch them. But they disconnect. They can either withhold sex altogether, or here's another thing that they may do in the devaluation slash discard phase, which devaluation is right before the discard and during the discard as well, is that when talking about physical intimacy can also be very mechanical, so that it can seem like this person is just emotionally disconnected, and sex is very unpleasant. It's almost like a person is just using you in a way that feels very inhumane. There's no connection, there's no love there, there's no closeness. It's just very cold, mechanical sex. Um, and I just want to put that in that way, right? Don't want to get too graphic with that. Passive aggressive behavior. So, maybe being rude, or maybe having a problem with you and not addressing it in the moment, but getting their anger and frustration out on you in other ways, or holding a grudge, just like holding on to something, and then letting it out at the most odd or random time. Gaslighting, where they're making you think that there's something wrong with you. So gaslighting is when they're gaslighting, they may also call in reinforcements, which means that they'll call in people to back them up, or to get in the middle of your argument, but also use to back them up, to paint a picture that there's something wrong with you, or there's something wrong with the way you feel, or that you didn't experience things the way that you thought you did. And so that's very common, in terms of they're making you seem crazy. Now that you're starting to question, something's wrong, or I feel disconnected, um, we're not as close anymore. I'm noticing that we're arguing all the time, or we're just not having a lot of fun anymore. And so this would be the stage in where they're painting a picture that no, everything's fine, or, everything was fine, but you are the one who had the issue. You're the one who's making the relationship very tense. It's because of your attitude, it's because of your problems, it's because of your distrust, it's because of your doubt. And it's just because you're just negative, right? You're a negative person. So again, they flip the script. They may bring in their mom, they may bring in a friend, a colleague, or to kind of back them up and say, hey, yeah, I know this person to be a great person. So if there's an issue, it must be you, right? Or that's not the way we experience this person either. So therefore, it must be you. Fourthly, is picking fights. It's not uncommon for narcissists to pick a fight. And I say pick a fight because this is something that's done usually a lot of times to create a hostile environment. And when an environment is hostile, or there's just a sudden shift in the tension, that can be utilized as a tactic to do whatever they want to do. So if they're trying to get out of the house quick and go see somebody else, if they're trying to just, again, they're starting to make reasons in their mind to get out of the relationship, picking a fight is the best way to do it. And it could be about anything. It could be about the most absurd, thing ever, but they're going to pick a fight, right? And that may be a ruse for them to go be with someone else, go out drinking and gambling or doing what they want to do, or it may be a ruse for them to leave the house for a week and be justified and not have to come up with a reason about where they were or why they did what they did, right? They can just go. And if you ask them to explain what happened or their behavior and why they felt the need to do that, then they could flip the script and say, it's because of you and what you did to me, and just the negative environment. I just couldn't stand to be around you. Right. And this is something that's oftentimes also, this is also another manipulative tactic that's used during holidays and special occasions where fights are picked, and then they could, moonwalk right on out of that holiday and not be accountable for their actions, right? And so they attempt to do that. So this could look like a partner becoming extremely uncontrollably angry. They may become physically aggressive, or their emotional abusiveness may intensify, their verbal aggressiveness may intensify, their psychological abuse may intensify. They may be utilizing veiled threats, or they may be causing all types of ruckus where they are, they're coming over unannounced and they're getting enraged or angry with you. They're calling you and screaming at you obscenities and things like that. So this rage, there's certainly an uptick and things like this, where these things are unpredictable and you may feel as though you have to walk on eggshells more. You may feel scared and worried for your safety. You may minimize feeling scared or threatened for your safety and just say, oh, they just get like this, and just trying to convince yourself that this person isn't dangerous or that they'll never hurt you, when in fact they actually do and might, even if it doesn't come to the point of being physical. Just the uptick in the verbal, mental, emotional, or psychological, that's also equally as damaging. And so you're going to see that. Projection is very interesting. Anytime you want to know what a narcissist is doing, you just kind of you look at what they're projecting, right? And so projection is when they accuse you of doing something, which is something that they're usually doing. So, for example, they may accuse you of cheating, right? Cheating is a very common thing, and there could be absolutely no evidence or rational argument to be made for you being deceptive or you betraying your partner. And it might in all likelihood seem like the accusation is coming out of thin air. At first, you may think, oh, this person really cares about me. They're just concerned that they don't want me to go anywhere. But then it just becomes also like an obsession, where they're constantly accusing you of doing something and you wonder about where this is coming from. And this can work in a variety of ways, and where you're projecting. Projecting keeps a person in their place, right? And when a person feels projected on, when I accuse you of doing something, even if you didn't do it, most people, when they're accused of something, they become defensive, right? And when we become defensive, we want to offer up an explanation. We want to prove ourselves, right? So we may try to show our partner our phone, or try to show that there's no evidence, or try to explain every minute detail about where you were and what you did today and who you were with and all this other kind of stuff to try and make them feel more secure, right? And to not rock the boat. Um, and that takes the attention off of them and what they may be doing, so that they can keep tabs on you, and they can do what they're doing, and keep you sort of in a place where you're walking on eggshells as well, so that you make sure not to ever question that. And they can have access to you, they have access to your life, and they have access to your emotions so that they're in control, and that you will not catch on to what they're doing, right? That's kind of how that works. But also, too, projection can intensify quite a bit during the discard phase. This is also not uncommon with narcissists who have people that they're rotating around, right? And that they're kind of stepping out with different people. One of the types of narcissists, there's a special name for this type of narcissist. And I don't know if you've heard of it before, but it's called a hobosexual. And a hobosexual, if you don't know, is a person that, a narcissist that needs a place to stay, typically. So, a person that will fall in love very quickly to get their immediate needs met. And usually that immediate need is for housing and financial support. And so these are the types of people that will live off of someone else, and, just drain them financially, because they have no intention of working, but they say they're in love just as long as the money well is running, as long as they have a place to stay, and as long as you are financially paying for them. If that well runs dry, or you start complaining about financial woes, or you start asking for something that is beyond what they're willing to do, which most of the time they are not willing to do anything, uh, you know, especially if it's emotionally. But if they start to grow tired of that, or they start to feel like, your resources are running low, or they may want more, then they will oftentimes start trying to reconnect with old people that they were using, for financial or personal gain, or they will start trying to make new connections. Who's going to be my next victim that I can mooch off of and take advantage of for my own personal gain, right? So that would be an example there, where they're just kind of rotating through, and I'm going to say what I need to say to you, and I'm going to go stay over at this person's house, right? And this is also a time, it's also not uncommon for things like ghosting and rage and things like this to escalate while they're projecting, accusations, and things like that onto you. Seven is the silent treatment. So this is where stonewalling happens. You get into it, right? They might pick a fight, right? And you're kind of trying to talk about problems in the relationship, or just talking about challenges or boundaries or things that you may have issues with, or you may just be trying to even connect and understand your partner better. And what do? They stop talking to you, and they may still be in the house. You two might be just kind of navigating around each other like ships in the night, right? You're kind of like, you're not even roommates, because the silent treatment is also another form of hostility. And it becomes very, very uncomfortable, especially if you are making every attempt to try to connect with your partner. You're making every attempt to try to talk about things and get clarity and understanding. And what do? They decide that they can't talk to you for a few days. They shut off communication. They don't respond to texts. They don't respond when you try to talk to them at home. They won't answer the phone call. They won't address you if you reach out on social media. And so they're done with you until they're ready to come back, and then they'll engage with you on their terms. And usually when they come back and engage with you on their terms, they're still not ready to talk about the problems or the issues that sort of sparked, the disruption. They're not ready to talk at length anyway. What they may do, as opposed to talking about the problem and trying to find a common ground, is they may accuse you of being the problem. So they may lay blame 1,000% at your feet, and refuse to talk about it, or refuse to see how they played a part in anything. And this is something that is repetitive. Breadcrumbing also happens, or false promises. False promises or breadcrumbs are when a person makes these promises to you that they know good and damn well they have no intention of ever fulfilling. So that might be something like, oh, I want to marry you. I want to have children with you. They're telling you all the things that you want to hear, but they have no intention of fulfilling them. And false promises can also come in the discard phase on a much smaller level, right? On a much smaller level where it's just a blatant lie, where they may say, okay, well, we'll go out on a date on Thursday night, and they never show up. They don't call. You don't hear anything. They go radio silent. They're not available when you try to contact them. So it's kind of like they're ghosting. But again, they make promises. Another false promise is during the devaluation stage, especially if you're trying to reconnect and get things back on track. Baby, I'll change. I'll do the work. I'll go to therapy. Right. I'm gonna straighten up and I'm gonna fly right. And I want us to be back together, and they don't make a serious attempt to rehabilitate or rejuvenate the relationship. They just keep doing what they're doing, or the attempt that they do make is very minimal, meaning that they might go to one therapy session, maybe two, and then they're done. Then they feel justified, like they did it. They did what they said they were going to do. The fact that things are not working out is because of you. You're the problem and not them. And so they kind of feed you these crumbs of, a relationship, right? And, they may continue to promise that they're going to work on things and promise that they're going to change during the stage, but there's never any actual attempt to do so. There's never any actual improvement in the state of the relationship because they're not doing the work at all, right? They're just kind of feeding you empty promises. And lastly, as I spoke about before, also during the devaluation stage, is this the famous smear campaign. And I spoke about that before when I talked about the housewife, where her husband was, calling her the C word, calling her the B word, to other people on the phone. And even, there was just a lot of hostility in saying that this person, they weren't happy with this person. This person never did anything right. This person, they blamed the person for all their problems. And so during the smear campaign, this is exactly what they're doing. They're doing this with friends, family, foe, co-workers, anybody who will listen, or anybody that's connected to the two of you, that they're going to try to, basically smear your name in the mud. And this is done to help them sort of prepare, help them to prepare uh, mentally for leaving you. And it also helps them to feel better. If they're telling themselves and they're telling other people that you are the bad person, you are the one who did all of these nasty things, whether or not it's true or not is not relevant here. It just means that this is part of what helps them to feel better about themselves and about their actions. And, when a person is pathologically lying like this, or pathologically lying in general, a lot of them actually begin to do it. The lie becomes as easy as breathing, and they actually start to believe the lies that they're saying, right? And so people just become so caught up in it that, you know, eventually if they say it over and over, or if they convince themselves and others that you're this bad person doing these bad things, then they don't have to ever admit or think about what they've done, and then they start to feel better and they start to feel justified, even though it's not reality-based thinking, right? And that's the part that makes it crazy making in general, and actually even dangerous in a lot of instances, where a person is so like invested in their lies that they actually start to believe it. And I always say that when you have someone that's like that, that's a very dangerous individual. Doesn't matter if you've seen the depths of it, their danger, but anybody who's taking things to that length is a very dangerous individual. Okay. So as I mentioned before, usually when you are in the devaluation stage, you're just kind of caught up in that bubble. How can I get us back on track? How can I get us back to where we were loving on each other and we were just so into each other and we couldn't get enough? How did we get here? How do I, fix my partner? And I had spoken about before, and I'll say this again, that a lot of times, during the devaluation stage, we notice that there's a shift. We notice that something has gone wrong. We're not sure what it is. We're not sure how to get it back on track because in the devaluation stage, you know, it always seems like no matter what you do, no matter how you try to repair or restore the relationship, you can't do anything right. So, with that being said, one of the things in terms of, just sort of managing and coping with the devaluation stage is just, taking a step back. Um, in the devaluation stage, what tends to happen is, your partner is, they're just falling off, they are backing off, they're not showing any interest, or they're basically blocking you from connecting with them. And when someone blocks you from connection, especially if you've been idealized and put up on a pedestal and romanticized, what tends to happen is you become the aggressor. And when you actually start aggressively start pursuing them, trying to, romantically connect, emotionally connect, and it's almost like you're trying to figure out what's going on. That's usually how it works in most cases. If you notice that that's happening, pump the brake. If you notice that not only is your partner shifting drastically, but you're shifting drastically, and it's not a good look. And not only are you shifting drastically, but you're shifting drastically out of desperation, that's not typically a good route to go. Notice yourself doing that, first of all. And then, secondly, what I would say is pump the brake on doing that. And thirdly, what I would say is very easy to kind of get caught up in stuff with people. But what I will, especially when you're kind of in this almost like a ping pong match where in the devaluation stage you're being, gaslit, you're being projected on, you're having all these things. And so you're just in this defense mode or you're in the survival mode. And so what I would say about that is recognizing that you cannot rationalize with an irrational person. You cannot have a rational conversation. You cannot have a rational relationship with a person that is irrational. You're already on two different wavelengths. And you're definitely fighting an uphill battle. So just recognizing like if when you're talking to your support group, when you're having that quiet time by yourself, just noticing if this doesn't logically make sense, you you cannot do anything to make it make sense. So no matter, it's almost like you're stepping in quicksand. The more you try to rationalize, justify, fight, argue, defend with a person that's just, they're going to go where they want to go mentally with this thing, right? So recognizing that you cannot rationalize or have a rational discussion with an irrational person. Fourthly, I would say, definitely always recommending therapy. The group membership is coming up. So I think those are things where you could take a step back. You could start looking at boundaries. You could start looking at things like self-worth, and knowing that you don't have time for this, and you deserve so much more. And just seeing, why am I allowing myself to get caught up in a situation that's causing me to spiral downward. Fifthly, understanding what you want out of a relationship and out of love. And I say that because There's a lot of people out there that put all of their eggs in one basket, and they look to their partner to validate them and make them feel loved and to make them feel special. And so they look for their partner to fulfill every single need. First of all, that's not realistic. Second of all, it's not fair. Your partner should never be the one to fulfill all of your needs, right? Your needs should be filled first and foremost by you. You should complete you without anyone else ever having to do so. And if you're not doing that, you're already doing it wrong. Because and you're already stepping into a dangerous territory, because when you start looking for people to validate you, to humanize you in every which way you go, situations like this happen because people are flawed in general. You're leaving it up to someone else to determine your worthiness. You don't ever want to do that. So being sure to engage in self love practices that are going to have you pouring into your own cup, where your partner is a part of your life, but doesn't make up all of you, if that makes sense. You are not 100% invested in someone just because you're hoping that they will complete you, because you don't feel complete and you don't feel fulfilled. So you're looking for them to fulfill all aspects of you, if that makes sense. So recognizing that therein, that your thinking around that needs to change. Okay, so that does it for today's podcast. Let me know what you think. Love to hear your thoughts. Thanks so much for listening. And until next time, you guys take care of yourselves, stay safe, and be well.